Hello everyone, my name is Rainer and today I want to show you how to disassemble and reassemble the detachable grip D3000. Let's go.
First we start with the grip tongues. We begin by removing the lock washers and the bolts from the grip tongue. I recommend using a ratchet wrench with a suitable hex bit instead of a standard hex key. With the ratchet you can apply more torque and reduce the risk of stripping the bolt. Once the bolt is loosened, you can continue with a standard hex key. Be careful to not forget the lock washers inside the grip tongue and dispose them. Next comes the grip operating roller. We use the same tools as before. Remove the bolts, the disc, as well as the lock washers, dispose the lock washers and pull a grip operating roller from the grip. The next step would be to remove the running wheels. But for this, we first need to remove the cotter pins. This can be a bit of a tricky one. I would recommend using a screwdriver to straighten both ends of the cotter pin. While doing so, make sure not to damage the thread of the bolt. After that, use a plier to fully straighten and align the ends of the cotter pin. After that, switch to a side cutter and grip the cotter pin near the head and pull it out past the locking screw. This is not a problem since the locking screw has to be replaced anyway. You only need to ensure that neither the thread of the bolt nor the body of the running wheel bracket is getting touched. And now we can remove the slotted nut using the appropriate socket and hex key. And again, neither reuse the slotted nut nor the cotter pin from before. And after carrying out the same procedure on the other side, the running wheels can be removed. Now, be mindful that the spacer washer may stick to the body of the running wheel bracket. Make sure not to lose it as it will be reused. To disassemble the running wheel into its parts, you can simply try to push the ball down the bearing. If this is not possible by hand, a soft-faced hammer may be used. However, make sure not to damage the bearing. In the next step, we're gonna take care of the running wheel bracket. We start removing all 4 nuts, lock washer and bolts from the running wheel bracket. Again, we dispose all parts except of the bolts. Now you can remove the running wheel bracket as well as the throttle strings from the main grip body part. Then secure the grip lever with a round sling and a hoist and make sure everything is under tension. Then we use the same technique as before to remove the cotter pin from the spring axle of the first spring pack and dispose the slotted nut. Now you can pull the spring axle out of the first spring pack. Now for the second spring pack you need to be more careful. When removing the axle, the spring pack may move backwards. Therefore, make sure to secure the spring pack from the rear with the hand while keeping your fingers clear to avoid pinching. As you can see here, I'm using the inside of my forearm to support the spring while removing the spring axle with my fingers. Now slowly release the grip lever until the spring packs rest on the brackets of the assembly stand. After that, we remove the bolt from the first spring pack and dispose the lock nut as usual. After that, we repeat the same steps on the opposite side and raise the grip lever slightly to remove the spring packs from the assembly stand. Now that the path is clear, we can slowly lower the grip lever until it rests on the main grip body part properly. We follow this by removing the plastic washers and pull the spring crossbeam out of the grip lever. We are now almost finished. Only the grip lever and its axle are left. To loosen the screws of the axle, I recommend using a wrench instead of a socket, in order to avoid damaging the grip lever. Although a torque wrench will be required during reassembly, this approach helps prevent unnecessary scratches during disassembly. Attention, this time both lock washers and bolts are getting disposed. Last but not least, the axle can now be pulled out of the grip lever and the main grip body. Once again, be careful to avoid pinching your fingers. As shown here, I place my hand flat underneath the grip lever to support it when moving the axle. By doing so, the grip lever is prevented from sliding forward while I prevent getting pinched. Now the only thing left to do is to push the round sling on the grip lever towards the rope channel until the grip lever is horizontal. Now you can lift it out of the main grip body part. For the next step, it is mandatory to wear safety glasses. Before starting to work, assure yourself that the assembly tool is not damaged, and while using the assembly tool, do not remain in the direct danger area behind the spring pack. Place the first spring pack into the assembly tool and push it into the lower frame opening. Pay attention to the orientation of the spring guide. The bore must be horizontal. Now carefully pre-tension the spring pack until the nut protrudes completely off the rear of the plate. Now we can undo and remove the nut. Depose the nut because it is not allowed to reuse it. Now screw the centering sleeve onto the spring guide. Its purpose is to protect the fine thread. We continue by slowly releasing the pressure until the spring pack is completely relaxed. Again, do not stand in the danger zone right behind the spring pack. Now, if everything worked as planned, you can now take the spring pack out of the assembly tool. And do not forget the spring disc and the space bushing. We keep up by pulling the spring guide out of the coil spring and removing the second spring disc. Now for reassembling the spring package, make sure to wear your safety glasses again. Now let's start reassembling the grip, starting with the first spring package. We start this by pushing a spring disc onto the spring guide. Pay attention to the correct positioning, the step side is on the inside. We follow this up by pushing the spring guide into the coil spring. Now for the next steps, I use the assembly tool to assist with the process. The spring pack is placed into the assembly tool, after which the second spring disc is installed at the bottom of the spring pack. The final component is the spacer bushing. Before installation, the correct orientation must be checked as shown in the video. And then the spacer bushing is installed at the bottom as well. After double checking that all components are correctly aligned and in place, the spring pack is pre-tensioned until the sleeve protrudes completely from the rear of the plate. Now that the sleeve protrudes completely from the rear, the centering sleeve can be removed again. At this point, please note, as mentioned before, a new nut must be used for the spring guide. The nut is centered and tightened by hand until it sits flush. Now use a torque wrench to tighten the nut to a torque of 20 Nm. Although the spring pack is highly pre-tensioned, the nut itself does not carry the spring force. Its function is to secure the position of the spring guide while the load is absorbed by the surrounding components. Make sure that the torque wrench is set to the correct tightening direction, otherwise excessive torque may be applied, which could result in over-tightening. Now slowly open the discharge valve on the hand pump and release the pressure until the assembly tool is completely relaxed. Congratulations, the first spring pack is now successfully assembled. Now, before assembling further, it is important to lubricate all individual parts. It is up to you if you do it all at once or part of the part before assembling. Mark, as this is a training grip and will never be used in operation, no lubrication is applied. The following components would normally require lubrication. Starting with the grip lever axle, we want to lubricate the middle part as shown in the video, as well as the axle from the running wheels, the contact surfaces from the running wheel bracket, as well as the axles from the spring pack. The middle part, as shown in the video, from the spring crossbeam. And last but not least, the bushings of the spring guides. Now let's jump over to the grip itself. First, the contact surface of the grip operating roller, as well as all bushings and bores. Now we start the wedding by fetching the grip lever using the round sling and the hoist and position it in the main grip body part. Now you may want to adjust the height of the grip lever so that the axle moves in easily. Make sure the chamfer holes are looking upwards, then pushing the axle horizontally and align the mounting holes of the grip tongues vertically. Proceed by securing the axle with new lock washers and new bolts. We then tighten the bolts with a torque wrench using a tightening torque of 24 Nm. Now for the spring crossbeam, we need to make sure to align it correctly. The larger middle flat on the spring crossbeam is on the bottom. then don't forget the plastic washers as well. They also need to be in the right direction, with the cutted piece facing to the bottom. Now we secure the grip again by pushing a round sling towards the spring crossbeam and attaching it to the hoist. Now we raise the grip far enough to have enough space for both spring pegs. We insert both spring pegs into the bracket of the assembly stand. We then lower the grip slowly until the spring peg has been inserted into the spring crossbeam. The next step is to secure the pegs with bolts and new lock nuts. We tighten the lock nuts until there is no play. Now we ascend the grip lever again with the hoist. Now the next step again can be a bit tricky, especially if you're working alone. You need to align the axle bores of both components precisely by adjusting the height of the grip lever. Once everything is perfectly aligned, the axle can usually be pushed in quite easily. Be mindful of the orientation of the axle. The axle features a shoulder that acts as a mechanical stop and prevents it from being pushed all the way through the bore. The bore itself has a machined flat, so the axle must be aligned correctly with the corresponding surface in the grip body. Make sure the flat and the shoulder are properly oriented before inserting the axle fully. Now we secure everything with new slotted nuts and tighten the slotted nuts with a torque wrench and a tightening torque of 20 to 40 Nm. Now after attaching and tightening both nuts, we insert the cotter pins into the nuts and bend the legs according to standard practice, usually at about 90 degrees to ensure proper locking. Now we can remove the round sling. We continue by fetching a running wheel bracket and place it with the thrust rings on the main grip body, facing the thrust rings towards the main grip body. We then install a running wheel bracket using bolts, new lock washers and new lock nuts. The bolts are getting tightened with a torque of 200 Nm. We then assemble back together the running wheels and don't forget the space washers. After making sure that the space washers are attached, we can fit the running wheels into the running wheel bracket. We fit the new slotted nuts and tighten the slotted nuts on the running wheel bracket with a torque wrench and a tightening torque of 200 Nm. Then we push a new cotter pin into the running wheel axle and bend the prongs over again. After applying the same strategy on the opposite side, we have successfully attached the running wheel bracket and the running wheels on the grip. One of the last things to do is to assemble the grip operating roller. To make the installation easier, I like to use a small tool to properly center the spacer sleeve between the bearings. We follow up with the securing disc, the bolts and new lock washers. We then tighten the bolts, of course with a torque wrench and a torque of 24 Nm. Now the only thing left are the grip tongues. We push the grip tongues onto the axle and secure the grip tongues with bolts and new lock washers. We tighten the bolts of the grip tongue with a tightening torque of 24 Nm and a torque wrench.
Now we have finished, the detachable grip is fully reassembled. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe you got some useful information as well. Thank you for watching.